Hey, it's Zariya. Welcome back to my channel. Or hey, if you're new here, I make content that helps you prosper in your mind, body, and spirit by growing in God and pursuing destiny. And today I'm picking up with part 2 of my testimony. So if you missed part 1, go back and watch that one.
Or you can watch part 2 and go back, but you probably want some backstory. Go get some backstory.
Here I am, finally with friends, finally feeling like I belong, but doing this on the inside. I still didn't feel good enough to be an actor. I still didn't feel good enough to be a singer. I still felt invisible at times. It's like all these negative things, they ain't leave. They were still there. I still went to sleep crying. I still went to sleep feeling alone because I didn't share everything. You know, I was sharing more, but I still didn't. I was still depressed, okay? Still depressed. And so senior year rolls along. I'm in the showcases in Chicago, LA, and New York. I'm kicking it even more with my classmates. I'm having a grand old time my senior year. And then pandemic. I had to leave school early, and at that point, I was just over school. I was ready to just move to New York and get the ball rolling. So, you know, I go back home. We're finishing the school year online, getting my little unemployment check, and resting for the first time in my entire life. Junior high, I was in sports, I was in orchestra. High school, I was in every choir known to man. I was on the drama team. I was in orchestra. I was doing dance. I was on POMs. And in college, I was 18 credit hours, 2 jobs, show here, sorority here. After school, I did this after school program helping 4th graders here. Like, too much at all times.
But that was because I was trying to deflect from the sadness, from the depression that I was living through. But that's neither here nor there.
I finally get some rest. You know, I finished off the school year. We don't have a graduation because of COVID-19. And I stumbled upon the Blessed and Bossed Up Society with Tatum and Kavaya Watrice. I don't remember what Tatum's new last name is. If you know the Blessed and Bossed Up Society, y'all know what I'm talking about. If you don't, please look it up. It's a
great
community and podcast. But they had a business in Jesus. What is it? Not an event, but it was like a 2-week-long free trial into their membership. Met some wonderful women from this group. And that was an answered prayer from senior year because I was praying for godly friends. I was praying for people to walk with. Senior year, I was also just praying more for my purpose. And I remember calling my aunt crying because I was like, I don't really know what God wants me to be doing. Like, I don't know what I'm here for. She was like, well, what do you see yourself doing? Like, do you envision yourself on the stage, like acting on the stage? I hadn't envisioned myself doing nothing. I didn't see myself doing nothing. And so I was seeking the Lord about my purpose. And since I was at home doing nothing on unemployment all day long, I really pressed into Jesus the most I had ever. That was the beginning of the demise. As I was pressing forward in God by myself, because I wasn't talking to anyone about the stuff that I was doing. So then the enemy started deceiving me. YouTube is a great place, but it's also a scary place. And this was the season of my life where YouTube was a scary place because I would be listening to these podcasts, I would be watching these YouTubers, and one person would say that someone else that I was watching was a false teacher or a false prophet. And then somebody else would say that the person who called somebody else a false teacher or a false prophet was a false teacher or a false prophet. So there was just so much confusion. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know who was telling the truth. And so then I just kind of stopped watching stuff, and I kind of just was reading my Bible because I was just like, I don't know what's going on. I was getting tormented in my sleep. Some nights, most nights, I would go to sleep and I would wake up and feel this pressure on my chest, and I would try and speak and I couldn't. I kept thinking that I was seeing stuff on the walls. Like, I really felt like I was losing my mind. Like, I was crying so often. I was just so afraid. And I went through this by myself. I didn't tell anyone about it until later. And so since living became so scary, seeking God became so scary. Like, I was so tormented. I kind of relaxed because like I was having dreams. I felt like I was seeing stuff. Like, I really felt like I was losing my mind. I kind of fell back and I started going back into the streets. Me and my best friend, you know, we would go places. I downloaded dating apps. I was going to men's houses. I was doing stuff, you know, I knew I didn't have no business doing, but for some reason I was just like, you know, like whatever. I kind of was just like doing stuff that even though afterwards I felt awful about myself, I was just like, well, how else am I gonna feel alive? How else am I gonna like leave this house and not be tormented in my mind? Like that was really the only outlet that I knew. I was either busy in extracurriculars or I was busy out in the streets doing stuff that made me feel awful about myself. Those were kind of the two options that I knew. And so I kept going back to what I know. I kept going back to smoking and drinking and masturbating and watching porn and going to guys' houses and like, just doing all this stuff that still left me depressed and empty and numb. As I was going through this, the one thing that was different this time around was because in college, I would be for the streets and I would be for the Lord. And then while I was for the streets, I wasn't praying, I wasn't reading, I wasn't, I have no contact with Jesus. And then when it got too bad, then I would go back to God. But this time around, I included Jesus in my mess. I'm gonna read a journal entry because I really included Jesus in the mess. Here are all my journals from the panoramic. This was May 18th, 2020. And we've fallen off once again. Just the study portion. I've been reading my Bible and at least casually praying. This quarantine has really been difficult for me mentally. Most days I don't want to do anything or talk to anyone. I've let my emails pile up. I've started a workout plan one day ago and I've already missed a day. No one, not a family or friend, have checked on me. I still feel as though I have no one but God to speak to. I just really want to get through this, but I don't even know how. I really don't even know how to talk about what's wrong. I just know that there is something wrong. I wish my relationships with people were better. I know I'm private as a coping mechanism and not out of desire. I don't share my problems because I don't want to be a burden. I feel like I am a burden, hard to deal with. I come with a lot of baggage that I have no clue how to unpack, but I'm figuring it out. I'm at this place where I'm sad but functioning still until those days when I can't move. And I don't want to share my problems because everyone has their own stuff they're dealing with. It's a back and forth thing. I have the thought to call someone or create something, but I can't find the energy to do it. I feel like this girl that I knew, except I don't complain about the things I want to change all the time. How can I even have friends and I don't talk? How can I have lasting, meaningful relationships? God, I want to change. I want to be a woman of my word. I want to be diligent. I want to have self-control. I think you're giving me the opportunity to be vulnerable with this other girl. And God, I want to take you up on the offer so badly, but I don't even know how to word what I'm going through because it feels so minute in comparison to other people's issues. Maybe that's where I should start. Writing was really helpful. So in August of 2020, I'm on Twitter actually, and I see this excerpt from this book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I read it and I felt so seen. And it was an excerpt of chapter 1, and I'm gonna read it. How emotionally immature parents affect their adult children's lives. Emotional loneliness comes from not having enough emotional intimacy with other people. It can start in childhood due to feeling emotionally unseen by self-preoccupied parents, or it can arise in adulthood when an emotional connection is lost. If it's been a lifelong feeling, it points to the likelihood of not being sufficiently emotionally responded to as a child. Growing up in a family with emotionally immature parents is a lonely experience. These parents may look and act perfectly normal, caring for their child's physical health and providing meals and safety. However, if they don't make a solid emotional connection with their child, the child will have a gaping hole where true security might have been. The loneliness of feeling unseen by others is as fundamental a pain as physical injury, but it doesn't show on the outside. Emotional loneliness is a vague and private experience, not easy to see or describe. You might call it a feeling of emptiness or being alone in the world. Some people have called this feeling existential loneliness, but there's nothing existential about it. If you feel it, it came from your family. Children have no way of identifying a lack of emotional intimacy in their relationship with a parent. It isn't a concept they have. And it's even less likely that they can understand that their parents are emotionally immature. All they have is a gut feeling of emptiness, which is how a child experiences loneliness. With a mature parent, the child's remedy for loneliness is simply to go to the parent for affectionate connection. But if your parents were scared of deep feelings, you might have been left with an uneasy sense of shame for needing comfort. When the children of emotionally immature parents grow up, the core emptiness remains, even if they have a superficially normal adult life. Their loneliness can continue into adulthood if they unwittingly choose relationships that can't give them enough emotional connection. They may go to school, work, marry, and raise children, but all the while, they'll still be haunted by that core sense of emotional isolation. I came across that by the grace of God. And this is in the midst of me being in the streets, trying to fill this emotional void with drugs and alcohol and men. I was seeking intimacy. I was seeking feeling something, feeling connection, feeling whole in these things. And they were just like not doing it for me. And so that opened my eyes to the fact that my feelings of inadequacy and feeling unknown and unloved and unseen were not minute. They weren't as small as I was trying to make them out to be. And that's the thing about emotional trauma, is that it's not addressed. We're taught that, if you have food, water, and shelter, that you're fine. Emotional wounds are as a fundamental pain as physical wounds, like she said in the book. And so for so long, I didn't acknowledge my pain because I thought that since I had my physical self taken care of, that the gaping hole in my soul wasn't important. And so after realizing that, I really went through this journey of trying to connect with myself, trying to get in tune with my emotions, trying to be more open, be free from the fear of closeness, be free from the fear of being known. In September, this channel on YouTube called Redefine TV had a sermon called Confronting Loneliness. And loneliness was my biggest wound that I was trying to, overcome, because I didn't want to feel lonely anymore. And September 11th, 3:39 a.m., I stayed up. I think I was high when I was watching this sermon, if I am not mistaken. I'm believing that after watching this Redefine TV sermon, Confronting Loneliness, that my life has been changed, because I really received some well-needed and unexpected reassurance from God that this writing/healing journey is the right move for me. I feel like God was speaking directly to me, and God, if anything that I have understood does not align with your word, please correct me. That's what I learned to start doing, because I was deceived before. And so I got into the habit of being like, Lord, if this is not true, please tell me. This was so motivating to continue to choose the hard work, to stop procrastinating, to really take being intentional in every aspect of my life. God is intentional, so should we. So Lord, I hear you. I just need to keep going and go harder. All of my heart, mind, and soul. So in this season, I was battling with depression. I was battling with these sin cycles, but what I didn't realize that I understand now is that I was having these sin cycles because cycles of anything is a trauma response. Because anytime you do something that you know that you're not supposed to do, or after you do it, you don't feel good about it, or you lose self-respect over it, it's because you needed something and you went to get that need fulfilled with something that did not fulfill that need. And that's why you have a negative feeling afterwards. That's why you have to keep going back. And so I was just in these cycles of self-sabotage, in these cycles of negative thinking, in these cycles of depression, and these cycles of me doing stuff that I knew I wasn't supposed to, but I couldn't stop doing. And I started this job, my first 9-to-5, and I started therapy. I really felt the need to get a therapist, because I would just wake up and I wouldn't know what mood I would be in, or I would be fine, and then out of nowhere I would lose all energy. I would get irritated. I didn't want to live. Like, it was just like it was so up and down. I felt like I was losing control. I had never experienced depression. I was depressed beforehand, but I was busy. I had like functional depression. I wasn't aware of the fact that I was depressed, but now I was feeling the feeling of not being able to get out of your bed, the feeling of not wanting to be alive. Like, it was like I was experiencing that so much more often than I ever had. And so I got a therapist and I started working. As I was working, I was consuming more of God. So I would be listening to sermons on the way to the city, because I would get on the train at like the crack of dawn, and then I would watch sermons while I was at work, and then I would listen to sermons when I came back. And so I was just learning so much about God. I was just maturing spiritually. That was kind of my routine for months. I would have therapy every week. And so I was, learning about myself, learning about, my own toxic traits and my own negative thinking. My therapist suggested this book. This is the first book. Well, she suggested 2 books. Safe People by Dr. Henry Cloud and The Emotionally Healthy Woman by Zariya. And so I started with safe people, and it's how to find relationships that are good for you, because that was one of my goals, was to create attachments, experience closeness, to be able to choose people that were safe for me. And I learned how toxic I was to myself, how toxic I was to other people. Like, I really just started to see how hurt people, how the way that I grew up really shaped my perception of everything. And I really just wanted to be healed. I really just wanted to be whole. I really just wanted to walk in freedom. You know, I'm doing this and doing that, and I'm still feeling depressed. And it was like, the longer that I was working this job, the more difficult it began to get out of bed in the morning. And at some point, you know, COVID was acting crazy. My job went remote. And so then I was in my room 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because at this point, I wasn't really like going out, and I wasn't really in the street.
Nah, I was still in the streets.
When I went remote, that was when the demise really came, because I was isolated and looking at a screen 24/7 and doing a job that I absolutely hated. And I wasn't in New York. I wasn't acting. I wasn't singing. I didn't have a creative outlet in the same ways that I was used to. That was the height of my depression. It was like, for months in 2021, I wasn't eating. I wasn't brushing my teeth. I didn't leave my room. I wasn't answering my emails. I wasn't really talking to people. Like, it really, 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 really got difficult for me. One week, I was feeling the tightness in my chest that I used to feel when I was younger, but it just wouldn't go away, day after day after day after day. Like, it stayed there for like a week. And I was like, what is wrong? And so I talked to my therapist about it, and she was like, you might have a chemical imbalance. You should go see a psychiatrist. At that moment, I'm like, oh. Before we had the conversation, I remember like deep down feeling like I had a mood disorder or something, because every day it was a toss-up on my mood. It was a toss-up even during the day. It was like, I might start off cool, but you know, by 3 o'clock, I might be in my bed, not able to move, not wanting to be alive. And it seemed cyclical. It would be like I was fine, then I wouldn't be fine, and then I'd be fine, and then I wouldn't be fine. And so when she told me, you know, you might have a chemical imbalance, go see a psychiatrist, I was like, yikes. And so I went to a psychiatrist, and she didn't really ask me that many questions. Like, she didn't really get to know me. There wasn't like a long, extensive test. She just gave me medication, and she told me, let's treat your depression. And if you react negatively to this medication, you more than likely have bipolar disorder. And so I was like, okay. And so I take this medication, and it is the worst experience of my life. That month that I was like trying medication, and you know, because there's a trial and error process when you're starting medication for mental illness, because you never know how the chemicals will work with your body. And so the trial and error process, I felt worse on the medication than I did before. Like, that made my depression worse. Like, 2 days into me taking the first medication that I took, I literally called my mom at like 4 a.m. sobbing, because I was like, I'm gonna have to take medication for the rest of my life. Like, my life is over. Like, there's something wrong with me, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I still didn't even get a diagnosis, because she was treating my depression, but I never got a diagnosis. And so I went on this process of going to psychiatrists, talking to them for 2 seconds, and then prescribing me medication. I went to like 3 or 4 psychiatrists after that first initial one that I took medication. And every single one of them talked to me for 2 seconds and then prescribed me medication. And I was just like, I'm trying to like not live anymore, and y'all are trying to give me medication that makes me continue to not want to live anymore. Like, this makes no sense. And so, you know, I'm talking to my therapist, and she is like trying to walk me through it. She's giving me tools and tips and but like, I didn't want to be alive. And it was so difficult. It's so difficult to like be in your 20s trying to figure out who you are, all the things, like juggle all these pieces of life when you can't get out of your bed. Then I went through the season of just trying to figure out how to get through. That was when I really got to know God for real. because the one thing that was supposed to help me, the medication, made me feel worse. So I was really just praying and reading and praying and reading and praying and reading and praying and reading. And the more that I prayed and the more that I read, the more that, I was speaking to God, the more he was pulling me out of the pit, the more he was showing me how spiritual mental illness is. And I'll probably talk about that later. As I was slowly but surely getting pulled out of the pit by my relationship, by my connection with God, I got led to a church. That church really was teaching me how to win the battle in my mind. It's like the more that I learned about who I was as a child of God, the more that I learned about the authority that I have as a child of God, as a true child of God, the more that I learned that what the world has to offer me is nothing compared to what God has to offer me. The more that I learned about the greatness that God has for his children, about the fulfillment that you can get from God, the more I started to turn away from the world, turn away from my old ways, get pulled out of depression, get pulled out of anxiety. The more I learned how to turn off these negative thoughts, the more I learned how powerful your thoughts are. When I got my second therapist, she was teaching me, what is it? I think it's neuroplasticity. It's basically like your chemicals in your brain can be changed by changing your thoughts. So I learned the power of changing your thoughts, and through writing, through singing, through praise, through worship, through getting closer to God, the more whole I felt, the more present I felt. Like now I'm at a point where I feel so present. I don't feel empty anymore. I don't feel disconnected anymore. And I have moments where I feel, unloved or unknown or unseen or silent, but I realize now that those are lies that the enemy are telling me, and that I'm learning that I don't have to believe them, that I don't have to agree with them. I'm learning that the cycles that you're in is from trauma, and if you would just if you would just allow God to heal your heart and heal your past and heal your mind, you wouldn't continue to do the things that make you feel bad about yourself. You would finally gain the self-control to do the opposite of how you're feeling. I'm still walking through my healing. I'm still unlearning. I'm still recovering from 23 years of depression. Well, probably not 23. I'm exaggerating, but I'm learning how to take care of my body. I'm learning about how your food and your gut is a big factor of your mood. I'm learning how your thoughts are a big factor of your mood, but I'm also learning the biggest portion is that the gaping hole in your soul, that loneliness, all those negative thoughts and feelings is because you're disconnected from God. If you would just get that connection, you would show up in the world so much differently. You would feel so much more fulfilled. You would just have that invigorating zeal for life that you so longingly desire. Sex, money, fame, status, it's not gonna make you feel alive the way that you think it will. We were created to be connected to God, and as long as you go without being connected to God, you're never gonna feel fulfilled. And I feel so much better. Like I can read that entry from 2016 and laugh, but 2016 me was so broken. 2016 me was so hurt and lonely and just empty and numb. And 2021 me, I don't even know how to put it into words, and excuse me if I start crying because they're tears of joy, but 2021 me, when I finally committed to God, he started giving me back dreams that I set down that I thought I wasn't good enough to walk in. He started sending me people who are going through the exact same thing as me that I can be open and honest with. He's given me a safe place and people. I have a better grasp on my destiny and why I was put here and what my call is. He's restoring my relationships with my mom and my dad and my family. Me and my sister are best friends now, even though we used to fight. We used to get on each other's nerves. I'm just in a place where I never, ever, ever thought that I would be. I never thought was possible. If God had not put that on my heart to be crying out back in 2016 or 2017 or whenever it was that I don't know God, I literally have no clue where I would be. And so I share all of this to say, if you don't know God intimately, if you don't know God as your healer, if you don't know God as your savior, if you don't know God as your mother, as your father, as your redeemer, as your restorer, I pray that my channel will help you learn that God, because all of your broken pieces can be healed and you can walk in a level of authority and greatness and wholeness and self-esteem that you don't even know is possible. And I know that for a fact because I went through it. I'm still learning. I'm still healing. I'm not where God destined me to be, but I'm on the way. And I'm on the way joyfully. I'm on the way strongly. I'm on the way more affirmed than I ever have been. After this long story, thank you for sticking around through this. If you don't get anything else, seek out for yourself. If you've tried drugs, if you've tried men, if you've tried alcohol, if you've tried being something that you're not, if you've tried all these different things and you still feel empty and you still feel broken, I encourage you to try Jesus. Give him a try, and I promise you he will change your life. Yeah, I don't know what else I'm saying, so I'm just gonna end the video here. Okay, I love you, bye.